The Isolated Children's Parents Association welcomes everyone tonight as we celebrate our 50th anniversary. For any organisation this would be a noteworthy milestone, but for the Isolated Children's Parents Association it is momentous, given that the organisation is totally run by volunteers. For 50 years, our focus has been on highlighting the inequity of the educational needs of children and families living in the regional, rural and remote areas of Australia. The threatened closure of the Burke Hostel at the end of 1970 was the catalyst that set our cause in motion and saw the Burke branch of the Graziers Association call a public meeting on the 9th of February 1971 to discuss the educational issues in Burke and the surrounding district. The first meeting highlighted the problems that were common to many, and Mrs. Pat Edgley was so alarmed at the inadequacy of government care or assistance for isolated education that she called for a public meeting in Burke on the 16th of April 1971 and organised for a notice to be run in the local Burke newspaper, the Western Herald. From this meeting, the inaugural branch of the Isolated Children's Parents Association was formed. ICPA gave families a medium where members could start evaluating needs, set goals and make submissions. With determination to pursue these goals, the organisation grew. Following that initial meeting, over the next few months branches started to form throughout the rest of the states and territories, and the chairman of the Burke branch, Mr. Wally Mitchell, recognised that it was essential to form a national body with identical objectives, and so a meeting of all ICPA branches was called at Burke on the 2nd of October 1971. 69 people comprised of representatives from 17 branches, 10 in New South Wales, 5 in Queensland and 2 in South Australia met in Burke and decided to form a Federal Council of the Isolated Children's Parents Association. A constitution was adopted and 10 aims were formulated. The initial objective was to obtain equal justice for every school child isolated by distance to give the same educational advantage as was already available to non-isolated children of the Commonwealth. 50 years on and our objectives remain steadfast. As the membership grew, ICPA began to be heard. The newly formed branches of the association initiated and funded surveys trying to ascertain the numbers of isolated children, their access to education and their other educational needs. This final information was collated by ICPA and thanks to a grant received was printed in 2 volumes. There was now the hard evidence needed to present to government our strengthened case for assistance. From these findings, it became apparent that there was a multitude of factors about isolated education not contemplated by the non-isolated decision makers. We have certainly come a long way since then. The passion and commitment of our members, the giving of their time, sharing of abilities and the financial support offered at times when so many were doing it tough is a standout feature of the membership over the last 50 years. It is the strength of this organisation. We have one focus and that is our children, making sure that they have the educational opportunities to see them thrive and develop the skills required to become productive members of society and reach their full potential. With many of our members living in isolated areas and by using our early communication of two-way radio, party lines, and progressing onto the high-capacity radio concentrator telephone systems, fax, snail mail, and moving to email and face-to-face meetings and of recent times Zoom meetings, we have overcome the challenges of distance and technology, enabling us to keep communication channels open, ensuring our members are kept up to date with the latest in our advocacy and allowing the sharing of information around Australia of what is happening within our own areas with the education of our children. From our first typewritten newsletters to the publication of our quarterly magazine Pedals, plus regular e-newsletters, we are able to ensure relevant information is passed on. Our quarterly magazine has a great array of interesting articles that have been submitted by members, and sometimes when we feel we are not being heard or our cause is slowing, there comes a good news story in a publication that strengthens our resolve to continue. Our conferences are so important to the work we do, given our policies are formed from motions presented and passed by members at these events. They provide our councils with the facts needed to continue to advocate for the educational needs of our children. It is a credit to our membership the number of people who take that extra step and attend the conference on behalf of their branches. The kilometres travelled, the time spent away from home and running their business are an enormous sacrifice our families are willing to make to ensure the educational needs of our children are kept in the spotlight. Commencing with the first website in 2002, the association has seen 3 revamps of the site, guaranteeing it meets the changing needs of our members. Our commitment to ensure families living in rural, regional and remote areas have comparable communication capabilities has resulted in ICPA having a presence on social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube and even LinkedIn. Thank you to our many talented council members for keeping pace in this modern world. The organisation started off with 65 cents in the kitty. Bunny Pound, one of our founding executives, often recounted the story of heading off for a deputation in Canberra on behalf of the association. He had left Bolen early one morning and was meeting up with the then Federal President Wally Mitchell in Bourke and continuing on to Canberra. As the organisation was in its infancy, there were no monies in the coffers and so executive members paid their own expenses. Frugal accommodation had been arranged for their time in Canberra, and on their last day, after paying their bill, they realised if they pooled their money, they should have enough to pay for the fuel needed to get home, but also realised they would not have enough money to pay for food. When they arrived at Wally's sister's home that night at 11 p.m, there was a large pot of curry simmering on the stove. Bunny said he and Wally ate the lot, much to the annoyance of Wally's brother-in-law. Bunny reckoned it was the best feed he had ever had in his life. Bunny then drove the 5 hours back to Bolen, and as he crossed the last grid into town, the sun was rising. Like many of us, it was back to business as usual as he headed out, loaded the truck, and spent most of the day delivering fuel to his clients. This was not an isolated case, as executive members on state and federal councils for several years bore their own costs and wherever possible travelled together. One year, 6 delegates travelled to the Bourke conference from South Australia in one car, with the luggage on the roof racks. Another year, some delegates carried their swags and slept wherever they could on their way to the conference. We owe so much to our founding members. Since 1971, ICPA has been able to meet its financial responsibilities through the generosity of its members and the support given by our communities. We are very grateful for the financial assistance we have been afforded by way of grants, donations and sponsors for conferences from businesses, educational institutions and government departments over the last 50 years. We thank you all for your continuing support. ICPA is often referred to as a peak educational body. It is not a title we have given ourselves, but one that has been bestowed upon us. We do our homework and with fact-based evidence offer solutions to lessen the inequities our children face in obtaining an education. You, the members, are the experts when it comes to the education of your children, and without your input, the achievements of the ICPA and the changes we have seen implemented would not have been possible. 50 years on and we are still as resolute as ever. We continue with our efforts to ensure the educational needs of our children are keeping up with an ever-changing educational system, which is no easy feat in this technological age. The last 2 years have been challenging for everyone with COVID restrictions in place. We have all taken up the challenge and moved into the virtual world of meetings, hosting a conference, and for those not used to teaching their children from home, becoming a home tutor. It is wonderful to be able to meet again face to face for this year's conference. And finally, there is a very special group of people that we would like to acknowledge. They are the partners and families of our executive and committee members throughout our 50-year history. Anyone who has served at branch, state, or federal level for ICPA knows only too well the time spent away from family life. Without the unwavering support and sacrifices made by these families, the achievements of ICPA would never have been possible. Thank you. As you make your way now into the conference dinner, we wish you all a fun-filled night catching up with friends, retelling stories from past years and celebrating this milestone of our 50th year.